Greetings to everyone present here today and for those who are watching virtually. Merry 420. My name is Queen Adesuyi, and I'm a former co-chair of the National Cannabis Festival's Advocacy Committee. I recently joined the Color of Change as a policy strategist after spending 7 years at the Drug Policy Alliance, where I worked to dismantle the racist, classist, and failed war on drugs on the federal, state, and local levels. Before I get started, I'd be remiss not to take a few seconds to honor those that have been and still are impacted by criminalization, incarceration, deportation, loss of children, loss of employment, loss of opportunity, loss of housing, and loss of hope, even in the face of what feels like the imminent end of the decades-long charade called marijuana prohibition. Our collective stories are the soil, the foundation of this movement to finally end the harms of criminalizing and stigmatizing this plant that many of us know as a medicine. We are closer than we have ever been to federal marijuana legalization. And a huge part of how far we have come is due to the work and leadership of this incredible congressional trailblazer that I have the honor of introducing today. I can talk about how she was the first person in the US House of Representatives to introduce a bill that would end federal cannabis legalization, with a huge focus on addressing the harms of previous convictions and ensuring community reinvestment. That was the Marijuana Justice Act. I can talk about how that bill then laid the foundation for the historic 2 times passage of the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act out of the House. I can talk about how that effort has laid the groundwork for where we are now with the most comprehensive bill to end prohibition, establish a regulatory framework, and account for the harms in the Senate. But I really want to highlight the time I witnessed and worked with Representative Barbara Lee on efforts to get the Congressional Black Caucus to take a hard stance position on ending marijuana prohibition and ensuring community reinvestment in any effort. Congresswoman Lee deserves all of the flowers. She can't join us in person today, but without further ado, let's tune into the remarks that Congresswoman Barbara Lee graced us with today.
Hello all. Let me begin by thanking all those who came out for this very important National Cannabis Policy Summit to discuss comprehensive cannabis reform. I regret that I could not be with you today, but I just want to thank you all so much for your tireless work. As a co-chair of the bipartisan Congressional Cannabis Caucus with my colleagues, Representative Joyce, Blumenauer, and Mass, we have been working hard to continue advancing the conversation around cannabis reform in Congress, using both traditional routes and, yes, through the appropriations process. As many of you may recall, we passed the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement, or the MORE Act, led by Chairman Nadler in the 116th Congress, the first time a cannabis decriminalization bill passed a chamber of Congress, and then again in the 117th Congress, thanks to you. Key equity provisions from my bill, the Marijuana Justice Act, which, yes, was the first marijuana racial justice bill introduced in Congress, were incorporated into the legislation. Senator Booker and I led this effort, and it was the beginning of our sustained effort to not only end the war on drugs, but invest in communities most impacted by it. As the new co-lead of the Safe Banking Act, my colleagues and I are also hard at work in ensuring all players in the cannabis space, both large and small businesses, have access to capital to equitably build out the cannabis marketplace. In addition to our parallel track strategy around ending the failed federal cannabis prohibition, I recently co-led with Representative Joyce and Senator Schatz the reintroduction of the Veterans Medical Marijuana State Safe Harbor Act. This bill would create federal safe harbor protection for veterans and their doctors in using or recommending medical marijuana where it is legal in local jurisdictions. The bill also appropriates funding for the VA to conduct research on the effectiveness of treating chronic pain and reducing related opioid overdoses by using marijuana. This convening serves as an opportunity for all of us, members of Congress, civil rights and advocacy organizations, business owners, veterans, and more, to exchange ideas and to work together to tackle the challenges to meaningful cannabis reform. Public opinion has drastically shifted in support of cannabis legislation. Supporting cannabis reform is not only a bipartisan issue, but a winning issue. While 38 states and 4 territories have now legalized medicinal or adult use cannabis, the federal cannabis prohibition has disproportionately impacted communities of color. These disparities stem from the failed war on drugs. Despite equal rates of use, Black people are nearly 4 times more likely to be arrested for possession. We cannot think about cannabis legalization without thinking about criminal justice reform and restorative justice. Comprehensive reform is about leveling the playing field. Cannabis has become a multi-billion-dollar industry in my state of California. And while some companies are raking in millions, there are also so many barriers that often prevent individuals of color from opening their own businesses. Congress must step up and commit to a legislative agenda that will fully deschedule cannabis and end the failed war on drugs, reinvest in communities of color, and ensure small and minority-owned businesses have the opportunity to join this emerging market. Before closing, I want to take some time to recognize the Marijuana Justice Coalition for their unwavering work around equitably ending the failed cannabis prohibition. I got the opportunity to directly witness the coalition's policy expertise and keen advocacy when working together to pass the MORE Act through the House in past Congresses. I am so proud to announce that the recipient for this year's Community Changemaker Award is the Marijuana Justice Coalition. Please join me in giving a warm congratulations to the coalition for all of their efforts around advancing comprehensive cannabis reform. And with that, I will now hand it over to our expert panelists to kick off the discussion on cannabis expungements. Thank you again and congratulations.